Okay, dear student, welcome for the next lecture of physiology. So, in our 12th lecture, we will see the unit number 3, respiration. As usual, respiration is the basic physiological mechanism in which the oxygen is taken in the body from the environment into the lungs through the respiratory or nasal canals and releases carbon dioxide from the lungs into the environment. And this is nothing but the respiration, or to which we call it as the respiration. The intake of oxygen from the surrounding environment and expel of carbon dioxide from the respiratory organ to release heat and regulate metabolic activities in the body is known as respiration, or in short, respiration is to breathe or to exhale. So whenever the food is taken in last chapter we have seen that the food is intake, it is get digested, it is get absorbed, and after absorption it is stored in the form of glycogen. But whenever the food is split again to collect the energy or to release the energy for the facilitation of activities, then the oxidation process is needed, and for oxidation oxygen is very important, and therefore the respiratory system is prime importance, which take or play a key role in regulation of metabolic activities in the body. So the respiratory organs, mammals are well known. We all are well known about this, that accessory respiratory organs are nostrils or nose, or we can say nasal passage. It is followed by pharynx, it is followed by larynx, it is followed by trachea, and trachea is followed by bronchi and bronchioles. And around these bronchioles, the principal respiratory organs are located, and these are the paired long bag-like sac-like structure called as lungs. So these are paired structures in which the intake and expel of oxygen activity is carried out. So ventilation, next topic is ventilation. Ventilation means in and out of air from the nasal passage into the lungs, or we can say inspiration and expiration, or in another way we can call it as inhalation and exhalation, means movement of air in and out of the passage. So the passage of air in and out of the respiratory tract to maintain concentration gradient and convection currents, this is known as ventilation. Ventilation is just a passage of gases. The real respiration takes place in lungs, and these ventilator movements are brought about by the movements of the ribs, sternum, diaphragm, and the intercostal muscles. So these all are facilitated together, the mechanism of inhalation and exhalation, or in short we can say the regulation of respiration is carried out. So breathing includes inhalation, taking air in, or we can call it as inspiration, and exhalation, or we can call it as the expiration. Inspiration and expiration, inhalation and exhalation, and is the parts of the physiologic respiration. These both are the parts of physiologic respiration. So in simple, the diagrammatic presentation shows that the pulmonary ventilation means lung respiration. So in this, the lungs pumps the air out, and that air contains CO2 in maximum amount, whereas the intake of oxygen or inhalation have maximum oxygen in the inspiratory air. So whenever the air comes to the lungs, it passes to the tissues by way of blood cells. So these blood cells, RBCs, containing the hemoglobin that binds with oxygen and passes into the different tissues. Whenever the tissue utilizes the oxygen, they release the CO2, and that CO2 is released into the lungs, and that CO2 is expelled, forced out whenever expiration is there, and whenever inspiration is there, air comes in, and in this way it moves. This is expiration. In short, this is inspiration, this is expiration. So this is the way by which the respiration takes place. Now, how the ventilation activity is carried out. We have seen in our body the nasal passage ends into the bronchioles, which is surrounded by the sac-like lungs, and at the lower side or on the inner side there is a diaphragm membrane in the abdominal cavity just below the chest, and that diaphragm moves in and out or up and down, and which pushes the lungs to expel the air, and whenever they relax it allows the inhalation. And for this movement ribs also takes part, and the intercostal muscles which are attached to the ribs are also helping to facilitate the movement of lungs in and out, or lungs pumping, and that expels and allows to inspire. In this way the respiration takes place. So shortly we say that the respiratory organs are enclosed in thoracic cavity between the vertebral column, sternum, and laterally by the ribs. So ventilation is a breathing mechanism in which in and out of air from respiratory organs is carried out. And during inhalation, the muscles of chest wall contracts, which moves the ribs upwards. At the same time, the diaphragm moves downwards, enlarges the chest cavity, so the air enters the lungs. While during exhalation, the diaphragm moves upwards, and simultaneously the muscles of chest wall relaxes, which allows the air expel out, and these both activities together is known as ventilation, or we can call it movement of in and out of air in the respiratory passage. Now, how the actual mechanism of movement of these ribs, the sternum, intercostal muscles, and diaphragm is being facilitated. The mechanism of ventilation is carried out by intercostal muscles and the diaphragm mainly. The intercostal muscles, these are attached to the ribs, and there are 11 pairs of intercostal muscles present in 12 pairs of ribs in human being. So these muscles are arranged externally as well as internally. Means they support from both sides and facilitate the movement of ribs whenever respiration or mechanism of ventilation is carried out. So external intercostal muscles, so these are found attached to the distal border of one rib and then radially forwarded to the dorsal edge of another rib. So in short we can say that they in cross way they are attached to the ribs. In between two ribs they look like slanting threads, or we can say incline the threads helps to contract the lower ribs so that the thoracic cage is elevated and the sternum is moved forward, and this allows the air enter in respiratory passage, and this is known as inspiration. So expiration and inspiration, these are the two mechanisms which facilitate the ventilation. So the actual mechanism of ventilation is facilitated by these internal intercostal muscles and diaphragm. So now we have seen external intercostal muscle, now internal intercostal muscles. After inspiration of air, or entering air in the lungs, the swollen chest area relaxes down and fibers of the intercostal muscles attached to the ventral part of the ribs runs to the posterior part of rib and from behind. So this is the actual movement, or this is the actual way of contraction and relaxation of the muscles. The contraction of these muscles relaxes the upper ribs down to the lower ribs, and that pulls up the sternum towards the inwards. And in this way, the stretching and relaxation, or we can say contraction and relaxation of the muscles facilitate the respiration, or we can say ventilation. Then what is the role of diaphragm? Diaphragm is at the lower side of the chest. Diaphragm is the sheet of muscles between the thorax and abdomen, or we can say diaphragm separates thorax and abdomen by a membrane like sheet. We can say hard sheet. It separates lungs, other visceral organs. This musculofibrous structure, diaphragm is a musculofibrous structure, helps in respiration. The phrenic nerve controls the movements of these muscles, and they are attached to the periphery of the chest or chest wall as such that they form convex floor to the thoracic cavity and concave to the abdominal cavity. So longitudinally, it increases the thoracic cavity. The diaphragm muscles play very important or key role in the inspiration. So here muscles, diaphragm and ribs along with sternum playing a important role in the ventilation, but in spite of that, the phrenic nerve control, nervous control is also there, which also facilitates the activity of muscles, and the whole activity is being facilitated. Now we will see in detail the inspiration and expiration. Both activities are different, and they are carried out separately, alternately, one by one, and that ventilation exchange the airs in and out of the body. Now inspiration. In inspiration, or we can say inspiration is an active process of respiration in which atmospheric air is drawn in when the pressure within the lungs is less. Means whenever the pressure is low in the lungs, the respiration, inspiration takes place, or we can call it as the atmospheric, we can call it as the exchange of air from the atmospheric air and lungs. In another way, inspiration is initiated by diaphragm and a special set of muscles called as intercostal muscles, and they are arranged in between the ribs. So these muscles help to maintain the gradient in between the lungs and environment. They maintain the gradient means, we can say in simple way, they maintain the balance of the air, or we can say the gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide. The contraction of diaphragm initiates to increase the volume of the thoracic cavity, which in turn increases the pulmonary volume, and this results in decrease in the intrapulmonary pressure, or less than the surrounding pressure in the environment, and this facilitates movement of air in the respiratory passage, and so called as inspiration. So this is a simple and regular mechanism in respiration. So here the main thing is to be remembered is that the maintenance of concentration gradient is controlled, or we can say regulated, or we can say balanced, and then inspiration is the intake of air activity is completely carried out. Now expiration means expel of air from the lungs outside the nasal cavity or nasal chamber. The passive movement of air expelled out from the lungs is known as expiration. The recall of inspiration may know as expiration because the contracted intercostal muscles naturally relax, and the relaxation of intercostal muscles and diaphragm lowers down the sternum to their normal position back and reduces the thoracic volume. And due to this, the intrapulmonary pressure increases. The intramuscular or intrapulmonary pressure due to muscles increases above the atmospheric pressure and causes the forcing of air from the lungs and this is called as expiration. Whenever air is thrown outside the respiratory passage, that is nothing but the simply expiration, and whenever air is inhaled or entered in the respiratory passage, we have already seen this inspiration. So this is expiration. Inspiration and expiration are alternate activities in the process of respiration. So the next topic is respiratory capacities. So different organs in the respiratory system have different respiratory capacity. It also changes according to the time, day, age, etc. So first of all, we will see the respiratory passage or respiratory capacities, and in that the first topic we will study is the volume of air in breathing. In respiratory capacities, how much volume of air is facilitated or carried out during breathing is the respiratory capacity, or we can say the optimum level of intake and expel of air from the lungs is called as respiratory capacity in simple way. Now during respiration, the total air breathed in and expelled out can be measured by the respirometer. In adult, the capacity of lungs of man is about 5 to 5.5 liters and not more than this or less than. Less may be there but no more, because the capacity or the limit, optimum limit is up to 5.5 liters of oxygen, or we can say air. Now the second topic is respiratory volumes and capacities. So normally in adult, taking 12 to 15 breaths per minute with a complete cycle of inspiration and expiration. The volume of air is measured by an instrumental respirometer, and the process of taking the measurement is called as spirometry or respirometry. We can say spirometry or respirometry. So respiratory volumes are an important aspect of pulmonary function, which provides an information about the physical conditions of the lungs. Once the respiratory volumes are maintained in their normal or standard level, then physical condition of the person or animal is nice or good, we can say, and the respiratory capacity or lung capacities are also good. The respiratory capacity, or we can call it as a pulmonary capacity, is the sum of two more volumes. Next, factors affecting the lung volumes and capacities are age, sex, body build, and physical conditions. So these are the four factors mostly they affect the lung volumes or lung capacities. Some of the air in the lungs does not participate in gas exchange. It remains somewhere in the passage. Instead passing in and out, it stays, or we can say wait, or we can say it keeps as a reserve in a respiratory passage. So during exchange, such air is located in the anatomical dead space within the bronchi and bronchioles, that is outside the alveoli. So this air is nothing but the dead space air. So during this whole activity, we have to study, we have to know what are the volumes taken or maintained by lungs, what are the capacities of the lungs, etc. First, lung volumes. It includes the tidal volume, means total air passage containing the air whatever, and oxygen amount in that is nothing but the lung volumes. Respiratory reserve volumes, expiratory reserve volumes, and residual volumes. So these are the different steps that we will see one by one. All things we will study here. Lung capacities, this is the lung volumes and this is the lung capacities. It includes the respiratory capacity, functional residual capacity, vital capacity, and total lung capacity. So this is about the respiratory volumes and capacities. So prior to see the next topic and details about the lungs, lung volumes and lung capacities, how do they exchange, what is the real exchange of gases, that will be studied in the next lecture. So till then, see you.